Hey there, and welcome to a deep dive on something I know a lot of you are really interested in, migraines.
Definitely a topic that hits home for a lot of people.
It really does, and we actually have a listener-submitted article here titled, Studies of Migraines' Many Triggers Offer Paths to New Therapies. So,
Oh, wow. So they went out and found this for you.
yeah, they did. So this is something that I think is really interesting to them and clearly to a lot of other people, because migraines are one of those things, right? They're more than just a bad headache.
Yeah, you can't just pop a Tylenol and it goes away.
No, not at all. And it's so common, too. Like, the amount of people who suffer from migraines is astounding.
It really is. And for a long time, we really didn't understand what caused them or how to treat them effectively.
Right, it was like this big mystery.
Exactly. And we're just now starting to unravel the complexities of it all and develop new targeted therapies.
Which is what we're going to talk about today, right? Like,
Yeah.
what causes migraines? How are they different for different people? And what's the latest research telling us about how to actually treat them?
And what's so fascinating is that it's not just about finding a magic pill.
Right.
It's about really understanding the mechanisms behind migraines so we can develop those targeted therapies because, like you said, everyone's experience is different.
One size does not fit all with migraines.
Mm.
And, speaking of different experiences, this article we got it features a woman named Cherise Irons. And she actually had to leave her job as an assistant principal because her migraines were so severe.
Oh, wow.
I know it's heartbreaking to think that this condition can be so debilitating that it impacts your livelihood like that.
Absolutely. And it really highlights the very real impact migraines have on people's lives.
And, she talks about these triggers in the article, everything from like chocolate and cheese, which
Or the classics.
I know, right? Like, okay, I get that. But then it's like stress and even thunderstorms.
Yeah. What is that about?
I know. Like,
What are...
how do scientists even begin to unravel something that seems so random?
Well, and that's the challenge researchers face because migraine triggers can be so individual and varied.
Yeah.
It's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle, but the pieces keep changing shape.
Oh, I like that analogy.
It really is like that, though. And in the lab, scientists can actually trigger migraine attacks in some people using substances like CGRP nitric oxide or even PACAP
Wait, so you're telling me they can actually induce a migraine on purpose?
in a controlled setting, yes.
Wow. Science is wild. Okay, so it's like these substances are flipping a switch in the brain, turning the migraine on.
That's a good way to think about it.
Okay, so for the longest time, I swear I remember learning that migraines were all about blood vessels in the brain, like expanding and contracting.
Right.
Was that all wrong?
That was the prevailing theory for a while, but it turned out to be a bit of a dead end.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually way more complex than that. Now research is focused on the meninges.
The what now?
The meninges, those are the sensitive membranes that surround the brain.
Okay, yeah.
They act like a protective layer, and while the brain itself doesn't feel pain, the meninges are full of sensitive nerves, especially this one called the trigeminal nerve. So when those meninges get irritated, it's like a fire alarm going off in your head.
Okay, wow. Yeah, that's a powerful image. And I can definitely see how that would create that intense throbbing pain that people always talk about.
Exactly.
And it's not always just the pain, is it?
No, not at all.
Like I was reading the article, some people even experience temporary paralysis.
That's right. Migraines can manifest in incredibly diverse ways. It's a whole spectrum of experiences.
So it's not just a headache.
Definitely not. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Okay, so let's break this down a little bit because I feel like we're using the term migraine, but there are all these different types.
You're right. We need to be more specific. There are actually several ways we categorize migraines.
Okay, lay it on me.
So first, we can categorize them by their symptoms. So there are migraines with aura, where people experience visual disturbances like flashing lights or blind spots.
Can't even imagine.
And then there are migraines without aura, which are actually the most common type.
Okay, so those are the ones without the funky vision stuff.
Exactly. And then beyond those two main types, you have even rarer subtypes, each with their own unique characteristics.
It's like a whole secret society of migraines out there.
You could say that.
And then on top of those different types, you also have migraines that are triggered by specific things like menstrual migraines.
Yeah,
Which,
those are the worst.
talk about adding insult to injury, right?
Like kidding? It's like
Yeah.
your body is working against you.
Exactly. So we've got the with aura, without aura, rare subtypes. Menstrual migraines. Did I miss any?
Well, we can't forget about abdominal migraines. They're more common in children, and instead of head pain, they experience intense stomach pain.
See, that's what's so wild about all this.
Yeah.
It really is like solving a mystery, one clue at a time, because you wouldn't think stomach pain would be related to migraines, but it's all connected.
Exactly. And that just goes to show how much we still have to learn about migraines.
Okay, so let's talk about this CGRP thing for a second.
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier as a potential on switch for migraines.
Right.
what's the connection to treatment? Like you said,
Oh.
they can even trigger a migraine by injecting it.
Exactly. So researchers discovered that CGRP is often found in higher levels in people with migraines, and they could even induce attacks in the lab by injecting it.
So it's like the smoking gun.
That's a good way to put it. It really solidified its role as a key player in migraine development.
Okay, so the thought was if we can block CGRP, maybe we can prevent those migraine attacks from even happening.
Exactly. That was the hope.
And did it work? Because so that would be huge for someone like Charisse Irons, right?
Well, that's what they were hoping for, and the incredible thing is it did.
Well, way.
Yes, these CGRP inhibiting drugs are a game changer. They're actually the first class of migraine medications that were developed directly from migraine trigger research.
So they're not just masking the symptoms, they're going after one of the root causes.
Exactly. And yes, for someone like Charisse Irons, they could have been life-changing.
That is incredible. But the article did mention some questions surrounding these CGRP blockers. What were those?
Right, like with any new treatment, there's still more to learn. For example, most of the research on CGRP inhibitors has been done on women because migraines are more common in women. So we need more data on their effectiveness in men.
That makes sense. We need research that reflects the patient population.
Exactly, and it highlights that this is an ongoing journey.
Speaking of journeys, the article also mentioned this whole search for other migraine off switches, because what works for one person might not work for another, right?
Absolutely. One size doesn't fit all when it comes to migraine treatment, so researchers are exploring other avenues.
Okay, so what else is out there? What other migraine off switches are they looking at?
Well, one promising lead involves a receptor called AMY1.
AMY1. Okay,
Oh,
taking notes.
So imagine it as a lock on a cell.
Okay.
And CGRP is the key that activates it.
Got it.
Well, it turns out CGRP isn't the only key for this lock. There's another molecule called amylin that can also activate AMY1.
Interesting.
And when scientists injected a synthetic version of amylin, they found it triggered migraine-like symptoms in some people.
So are you saying we could block the AMY1 receptor, like changing the locks on the cell door?
That's precisely the idea.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And this is just one example. There's also PTAP, another potential on switch we talked about.
Right.
But it seems to work through a different pathway than CGRP.
So that's good, right? Because
Yeah.
it could be another option for people who don't respond to CGRP inhibitors.
Exactly. We need a whole toolkit of options.
I love it. Multiple weapons in the migraine fighting arsenal.
Uh,
This is so cool. Okay, what else?
well, there's also some fascinating research into potassium channels.
Potassium channels. Remind me what those are again.
So remember how we talked about CGRP and PACAP possibly causing cells to release potassium?
Yeah.
And how that potassium release might be what triggers those pain signals?
All right.
Well, some researchers believe that targeting those potassium channels directly rather than the molecules that activate them could be a whole new approach to treatment.
It's like cutting off the problem at its source. Okay, that is next level thinking right there. I am loving this deep dive. So many different angles to explore.
It really is a testament to how much we're still learning about the brain and how it relates to pain.
Yeah.
Speaking of different approaches, the article mentioned research into new types of opioids for migraines.
Now I know what you're thinking, opioids. With everything going on.
Right, because we hear so much about the opioid crisis.
Exactly.
And those risks are very real.
And that's the crucial difference. Traditional opioids like morphine, they act on what we call the mu-opioid receptor.
Okay.
Those are the ones associated with addiction and euphoria. But these new opioids, they target a different receptor altogether, the delta opioid receptor.
So they can potentially provide pain relief, but without those dangerous side effects.
That's the hope. Early research suggests these delta opioids don't have the same addictive potential. Plus, the delta receptors are found in areas of the nervous system directly involved in migraines, like the trigeminal ganglia. Remember those sensitive nerves we talked about?
Right.
That's incredibly promising. It's like researchers are always searching for that back door, a way to tackle pain without triggering those unwanted alarms in the brain. Speaking of different pathways, the article also mentioned this whole gut-brain connection. What's the deal with that? Is that like some new age thing, or is there real science behind it?
It might sound surprising, but there's real science there, and it's fascinating. Emerging research suggests that the trillions of bacteria in our gut, what we call the gut microbiome,
Right.
can actually influence brain function.
Hold on, are you saying the bacteria in my gut could be contributing to my headaches?
It's a definite possibility. And while research is still in its early stages, scientists are exploring ways to manipulate the gut microbiome, either through dietary changes or even fecal transplant.
Okay, fecal transplant. You're going to have to explain that one because, wow, that sounds a bit intense.
I know it sounds out there, but it's actually showing promise for a range of conditions. The basic idea is that by transplanting fecal matter from healthy donors into the guts of people with migraines, you could potentially restore a healthy balance of gut bacteria. And that in turn could reduce the frequency and severity of their headaches.
Okay, that is wild. It really goes to show how interconnected our bodies are and how much we still don't know.
Yeah.
I also noticed that the article mentioned migraines are the second most prevalent cause of disability worldwide, mainly affecting women of childbearing age. That's a staggering statistic. What are the implications of something so widespread, especially for women?
It's a huge issue, and it highlights the urgent need for more research, better treatments, and greater awareness. When you think about the impact on productivity, quality of life, healthcare costs, it's clear migraines aren't just a personal problem, they're a societal one. And the fact that they disproportionately affect women, it raises important questions about gender disparities in healthcare and research funding.
Absolutely. It's like we need to shine a spotlight on this and make sure women are getting the attention and resources they deserve when it comes to their health. Now, you mentioned earlier that scientists are still a bit puzzled by exactly how CGRP triggers those debilitating migraine attacks. Are there any theories out there about the steps between CGRP being released and someone actually feeling that excruciating headache or any of the other symptoms?
There are definitely some intriguing theories, and one prominent one focuses on the role of potassium.
Potassium.
Okay. Researchers have observed that when CGRP binds to its receptors on cells, it sets off this chain reaction inside the cell like a line of dominoes falling.
Okay, I'm following.
And what happens at the end of that chain, it leads to the opening of potassium channels.
Potassium channels.
Mhm.
Those are like tiny gates that control the flow of potassium in and out of cells, right?
Exactly. And when these potassium channels open, it causes a surge of potassium to flow out of the cells. This in turn can trigger a cascade of events, and one of the end results, migraine pain.
Wow, so it's like CGRP is setting off this domino effect, and potassium is right there in the thick of it, playing a crucial role.
Precisely. And because potassium is involved in so many vital bodily functions, researchers are carefully exploring whether targeting these specific potassium channels involved in migraine pathways could lead to more effective, more targeted treatments. Imagine treatments with fewer side effects because they're zeroing in on the root of the problem.
Now that would be a game changer, finding that precise switch to turn off migraine pain without disrupting everything else. So we've talked about these CGRP inhibitors, AMY1 receptors, PACAP blockers, potassium channels, even new types of opioids. Anything else on the horizon for migraine treatment that has you particularly hopeful?
You've covered so much already, but there's one more area that's generating a lot of buzz: personalized medicine. You see, right now it's a lot of trial and error with migraine treatments. What works for one person might not work for another.
Right? It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. But with personalized medicine, the hope is that one day we'll be able to tailor therapies to an individual's specific genetic makeup, triggers, and symptoms.
It's like having a custom-designed migraine treatment plan.
Hmm.
That would be incredible. But until that day comes, and it sounds like there's a lot to be hopeful for, what can our listener do right now to manage their own experience? We've learned so much about those triggers, but I imagine it feels overwhelming. Where do you even begin?
They can feel overwhelming, but I always say knowledge is power.
I like that.
Uh,
Okay, so knowledge is power when it comes to migraines. What does that actually look like?
well, we've talked about all these potential triggers, right?
Hmm.
Stress, lack of sleep, certain foods, weather changes, even hormonal fluctuations.
Right, it's like a minefield out there.
It can feel that way, but the key is awareness. Once you know what your triggers are, you can start to make changes in your life to avoid them.
So it's about identifying those patterns
Mhm.
and then making those lifestyle adjustments.
Exactly. And I always recommend keeping a headache diary. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just a simple notebook where you jot down when you get a migraine, what you were doing beforehand, what you ate that day, any medications you took.
So you become your own migraine detective.
Exactly. You'd be surprised at the patterns you might start to see.
I bet. And then once you have that information, you can start to make those changes.
Precisely. And beyond those lifestyle modifications, there are other things that have shown promise in studies like mindfulness techniques, regular exercise, acupuncture.
You know, I've heard good things about acupuncture for migraines.
It can be really helpful for some people. The important thing is to be proactive, advocate for yourself, and find what works best for you.
Absolutely. It's about taking ownership of your health. This has been an incredible deep dive.
I agree. It's been fascinating.
Who knew there was so much to uncover about migraines?
They're truly more than just a headache.
They really are. But as we've seen, there's a lot of hope on the horizon with all this groundbreaking research.
Absolutely. There's so much to be hopeful for.
It's true. And you know what they say, knowledge is power. I think that's the perfect note to end on. So to our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this fascinating deep dive into the world of migraines. We've covered a lot of ground today, but remember, the learning doesn't stop here.
Keep asking those questions.
Keep that curiosity alive and keep advocating for your health. Until next time.